So let's continue with tutorial 3.2.3. In this tutorial, we are going to understand about the mitigation strategies to protect data privacy and enhance security in testing with generative AI. Very important topic because you need to understand this in detail, practically how you are going to mitigate or the mitigation strategies. So when you are working in the real-time projects, you actually know about those mitigation strategies and you are pro in the real projects, and when you are working you actually can guide other team members as well about the security in testing with generative AI. So mitigation strategies to protect data privacy and enhance security. As Gen AI is becoming mainstream now, most of the team, there is very rare possibility that the teams are not using generative AI for their task, be it your software testing, the software development, or any other domain or area into your organization. Generative AI is very widely used. When you're using it, there are inherent risks involved. Regulations and standards emerge to mitigate them. Okay, so there are standards and regulations to mitigate those, and we'll understand those details in this tutorial. So regulations like GDPR provide safeguards for lawful data use. To mitigate these risks of data usage, the privacy, organizations should implement robust data privacy measures, for example, including data minimization, data anonymization and pseudonymization, secure data storage and transmission, and resources training. So you will see that all of these measures should be there for the data, for securing the data, and then training the team to make sure that these measures are followed. Additional mitigation strategies that can be considered: systematic review of the generated output. Whatever output you are getting from generative AI, reviewing that before blindly copying it. Okay, do not copy blindly. Evaluation by comparison with another large language model, another Gen AI tool. Choice of secure and operational environment. Regular security audits and vulnerability assessments, and staying updated with the security best practices. Okay, so we'll understand these one by one, the measures and the mitigation strategies. So data minimization and anonymization. So data minimization: process only the necessary data for testing. That is very, very important. Do not use massive data that you don't need in testing. If your test says that minimal set of data or 10 records are good enough to test a particular scenario or end-to-end scenario, just use that data. Do not get massive amount of data that you don't need. So that's data minimization. Avoid sensitive data unless legally permitted. Legal permission of the sensitive data requires a lot of approval process in the organizations. Mostly your testing will be good enough with the anonymized and minimized data. Then you have the data anonymization and pseudonymization. So what anonymization is all about: mask or replace sensitive information with non-identifiable data. The customer name, the customer email, the address should not be identifiable. It should be masked, or it should be replaced with something that cannot be recognized or identified as a real customer. It maintains realism without exposing the personal information of the customer. Okay, so that's another important thing. For example, replace John Smith and you have the phone number and the, say for example, address with, say for example, user A and some random number in the test data set when you are using the customer data or masking it. So that is very important when you are using the data. Then we have the secure data storage and transmission and resource training. So secure data storage and transmission, storing the data using encryption and access controls when you are storing the data. Then protecting data across environments, that becomes really important. Training the resources, training your team, the testing team and the whole project team on responsible use of the generative AI, that becomes really important. What you can put into the prompt, that becomes really important, especially if you are using the public generative AI solution. Even if you are using the on-prem, still responsible use becomes really important. Promoting the ethical practices and awareness of the risk, because we have we know that there are a lot of unethical practices that you can follow and loopholes that you can follow in generative AI to get sensitive information. So promoting the ethical practices, resource training awareness is very, very important. Example, encrypting the test logs before sharing. Okay, train testers to avoid prompt injection attack. That becomes really important. So when, say for example, you are getting the test log, straight away you're copying into the generative AI and trying to do the root cause analysis based on that test log. That is not recommended at all, because test log is for your internal application. Do not post all that information in the public generative AI solution unless and until you have the proper approval. And even if you have the approval, making sure that you that you do not share any of the sensitive information in the test log. Encrypting that log becomes really important. Then we have the systematic review and model comparison. So systematic review of the generated output from the large language model. So human evaluation ensures accuracy and quality of the output. As the review process, or within the review process, you can detect hallucination, any reasoning errors that might be there, any biases that might be there in the large language model output. You can easily get those or detect those with the review. Then evaluation by comparison with another large language model. So do not rely on just single model. Say for example, you can use multiple large language model for the same task, use same prompt for in different large language model, and then compare the output and see if there are any inconsistencies. Then compare with your requirement whether the output is in line with your project need, with your context or not, or it is not at all as per your context. So you will be able to get that detail if you compare the output with different model and then compare that output from different models with your real context, with your requirements, with your user stories. Okay, for example, model A generates 10 test cases for a particular user story and requirement that you have prompted the test cases for. Then model B generates 12. Then you manually review both of those and see which one is more relevant and more closer to the requirement and actually covers and is not hallucinated and biased or doesn't have the reasoning error. If both are providing better outcome, you then combine both and manually review and combine both and use those test cases after reviewing and updating and making sure they are perfectly fit and relevant for the user stories in your project. Okay, so that's the systematic review and model comparison. Then secure environments and audit. So choice of a secure environment and operational environment becomes really important. So depending on the level of confidentiality required, organizations can opt for different secure solutions. For example, using a commercial secure offering from an LLM provider. So not using the public LLM service or generative AI service, using a secure, say, private cloud, operating the LLM in a secure cloud, private cloud. That is another possibility. On-premise installation. When you have the model on-premise, you can control whatever is being prompted in that model which is on-premise will stay on-premise. So you have full control of the data. But if it is public cloud, whatever I am prompting, say for example, in the model, in the LLM, say copilot.microsoft.com, is I simply go ahead and open it in the browser. Whatever I type in the prompt is actually stored in the public cloud and is actually treated as the training data for future iterations of the model. Okay, so depending on how secure the environment requirement is, you can choose, or organization can choose, the LLM installation accordingly. Mostly in the banking sector, you will see that on-premise installation or private cloud is what is being preferred. Then regular security audits and vulnerability assessments becomes really important. Identifying and fixing any of the model weaknesses or a Gen AI system weaknesses, continuous monitoring of those models becomes really essential. For example, for banking app testing, prefer on-premise LLM and perform quarterly penetration tests on the model. So that's another important bit on the secure environments and using secure environments and auditing the LLM models. Next thing is staying updated with security best practices. So follow latest security guidelines and technologies. Whatever latest security guidelines are there for the models, whatever best practices and technology come in picture, you follow that, or your organization follows knows that and patches the model with those guidelines and practice and technology. Adapt to new threats and vulnerabilities. If there are new threats, if say for example there were vulnerabilities in the previous model, in the previous version, upgrading the version of the model to a newer version which has addressed those vulnerabilities and threats. The combination of these strategies is required to ensure data security while using generative AI. So any model that has threats or vulnerabilities, you review those with the latest technology and the guidelines, security guidelines. You patch it with the latest patch which has addressed any of the previous threats, will help you to be on top of any of the vulnerabilities and threats. Involving the senior engineers, security engineers, legal counsel, chief technology officer or chief information security officer, if present in the organization, in any of these large language model deployment and installation, and ensuring that they comply with the security best practices of the organization. So that is another important factor or important point to remember when using the large language model or generative AI into your organization and the projects. So that's all for this tutorial. I'll see you in the next tutorial of ISTQB generative AI testing certification. Thank you. See you in the next one.